The tall and proud figure of Commander Teo stood in the observation deck of the massive Valorian warship. His silver skin reflected the cold light of the distant sun as he stared down at the small blue planet below. Earth. The name meant nothing to him. It was just another world discovered in the endless expanse of space, filled with another primitive species that the great Valorian Empire would soon control. For 3,000 years, the Valorian Empire had dominated the galaxy. They had encountered hundreds of young civilizations, and each time the story was the same. The weak species either accepted their place in the empire or were removed from existence. It was the way of things. It was the way of progress. Teo had seen it happen countless times, and he felt no doubt about what would happen here. The reports about the humans were simple and clear. They were a divided species, fragmented into nations that constantly fought each other. Their technology was laughable compared to even the oldest Valorian systems. They had barely reached their own moon and possessed no understanding of space travel beyond primitive fantasies. Their weapons were crude. Their bodies were soft. Everything about them screamed weakness. Teo turned from the window and walked to the main communication chamber. Around him, Valorian officers worked at their stations, their movements precise and controlled. This was what separated the Valorian people from the lesser species of the galaxy. Discipline, structure, order. The humans, by contrast, were chaotic, emotional creatures driven by feelings rather than logic. They would be easy to manage. "Prepare the diplomatic team," Teo commanded, his voice deep and certain. "And send the transmission to the planet below. Tell them we wish to meet with their leaders. Give them a simple choice. Join the Valorian Empire peacefully or face destruction." The officers nodded without question. One of them, a younger Valorian named Kess, looked up from his station. "Commander, should we not first assess their military strength? Perhaps learn more about their capabilities?" Teo turned to look at the younger officer with cold eyes. "We already know their capabilities, Kess. They are insignificant. The only thing we need to learn is how quickly they will accept the inevitable. Now proceed with my orders." Within hours, a transmission reached Earth. The message was clear and left no room for misunderstanding. The Valorian Empire demanded to meet with human leadership immediately. They offered a choice that was not really a choice at all: accept integration into the Empire as a subordinate species, or face total annihilation. The news spread across the planet like fire. Every news channel, every government office, every social media platform filled with the same image: a massive ship hovering above the atmosphere and the cold message from an alien civilization. People filled the streets. Some prayed to their gods, others demanded that their governments fight back. But most simply felt fear. The fear of the unknown. The fear of something so vast and powerful that no human could truly comprehend it. Dr. Min-Soo sat in the emergency bunker in Seoul, surrounded by computer screens and government officials. She was humanity's leading scientist and the most respected voice in the world on matters of astronomy and space. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, and her serious eyes scanned the data streaming across her screens. She had spent her entire life studying the stars, searching for signs of other life. She had never truly believed they would find an answer like this. The President of the United Nations stood beside her, his face pale with shock. "What do they want, Dr. Min-Soo? Is there any way to negotiate with them? Can we reason with them?" Dr. Min-Soo took a deep breath. She had studied every word of the transmission, every image, every data pattern. "Their message is not really asking for anything, Mr. President. It is not an offer. It is an ultimatum. They are giving us 7 days to make a decision. They believe we are weak. They believe we will simply accept their dominance because we have no choice." "And will we?" asked the President quietly. Dr. Min-Soo's eyes met his. In that moment, she thought of all the struggles that humanity had faced throughout history. War, disease, famine, natural disaster. Humans had survived through all of it. They had fought, adapted, and endured. They were not a species that gave up easily. Even when the odds seemed impossible, humans found ways to survive. It was what they did. It was what they had always done. "No," she said firmly. "We will not. But I need to understand them first. I need to study them, and I need time." The meeting was arranged for 2 days later. A human delegation would travel to the Valorian ship to meet with Commander Teo and his officials. As Dr. Min-Soo prepared for the journey, she gathered her best scientists and military advisors. Among them was Commander Haewon, the leader of Earth's united military forces. He was a serious man with a lean face and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He had spent his life training soldiers and studying warfare. He knew that they were facing an enemy far superior in every measurable way. "We cannot win a direct conflict with them," Haewon said as he reviewed the Valorian ship's specifications. "At least not immediately. Our best weapons would barely scratch their hull." "Then we do not rely on strength alone," Dr. Min-Soo replied. She was looking at recordings of the Valorian officers, studying their faces, their movements, their patterns of behavior. "We study them. We learn how they think. We look for weaknesses. And we buy time." As the human delegation boarded the transport that would take them to the Valorian ship, Dr. Min-Soo looked back at Earth one final time, the planet that had been home to humans for millions of years, the world that had seen the rise of civilizations and the birth of countless dreams. She thought of all the people below, all the hopes and fears. She thought of how small they all were in the face of the vast universe. The transport climbed higher, leaving Earth's atmosphere behind. Ahead, the massive Valorian warship grew larger and larger. It was a ship built to dominate, built to intimidate, built to show that the Valorian Empire was absolute and unstoppable. But as Dr. Min-Soo stared at it, she felt something inside her harden. The Valorian Empire believed humanity was fragile. They believed they faced an easy victory. They were wrong. She did not know it yet, but this moment would change everything. The meeting about to take place would begin a chain of events that would echo across the entire galaxy. Humanity was about to prove that they could do something no other young species had done before. They could stand against the greatest power in the known universe and refuse to break. The meeting chamber aboard the Valorian ship was designed to intimidate. Everything about it was tall, cold, and angular. The walls were made of a material that seemed to absorb light, giving the room an endless and empty feeling. Commander Teo sat at the far end of the chamber, elevated above the floor so that anyone entering had to look up at him. His advisors flanked him on both sides, their expressions neutral and unchanging. They looked like machines more than living beings. Dr. Min-Soo entered first, her head held high despite the overwhelming sense of inferiority the room was designed to create. Behind her came Commander Haewon, his military bearing sharp and focused. With them were 5 other human delegates, scientists, diplomats, and 1 historian. The Valorian officers looked at them with expressions that ranged from mild interest to open disdain. Teo did not rise to greet them. He simply stared down at Dr. Min-Soo with eyes that seemed to see right through her. When he spoke, his voice was slow and deliberate, as if he were speaking to children. "You are the leaders of Earth? This is what your species has to offer in negotiation? You seem even more fragile in person than in your transmissions." Dr. Min-Soo felt anger flash through her, but she controlled it. This was exactly what she had expected. The Valorian Empire was so confident in their superiority that they had probably never learned how to truly negotiate. They had probably never needed to. Every other species they had encountered must have simply given in. "I am Dr. Min-Soo, a scientist and the representative of humanity," she said calmly. I have come to understand your terms and to discuss what is possible for our species. Understanding is simple, Teo replied. You join the Empire. You work to advance our goals. You accept that you are now part of something greater than yourselves. In return, you are allowed to continue existing. It is generous. It is fair. Your species should be grateful for the opportunity. One of the younger Valorian officers leaned toward Teo and whispered something. Teo nodded slightly. I am told that your species has what you call emotions that often override logical thinking. Is this true? Yes, Dr. Minsu answered. Emotions are part of what makes us human. They drive us to protect our families, to fight for our survival, to create and dream and hope. Perhaps you see them as weaknesses, but we see them as strengths. Tayo made a sound that might have been laughter. That explains much about your primitive state. Emotions cloud judgment. They make species unpredictable and unreliable. This is why the Valorian approach of pure logic is superior. We do not let feelings interfere with what must be done. Commander Hei-Wan could no longer remain silent. Then how do you inspire your soldiers to truly fight? How do you ask them to give their lives for something greater than themselves? They do not ask why, Teo said simply. They follow orders. They understand that individual desires matter less than the Empire's needs. This is discipline. This is strength. Dr. Minsu studied the commander carefully. She was beginning to understand something crucial about the Valorian mindset. They were disciplined, yes. They were powerful, absolutely. But they had never faced a species that fought for something other than survival. They had never faced an enemy that believed in something beyond rules and order. They had never encountered the kind of desperation that comes from protecting your home, your family, your entire civilization. I need to discuss something with my delegation, Dr. Minsu said. May we have time alone? Teo gestured to a side chamber. The human delegation was led to a small room with no visible means of communication with the outside world. As soon as the door closed, the others turned to Dr. Minsu with urgent eyes. We cannot fight them, the military advisor said immediately. We do not have the weapons, the ships, the technology. If we refuse their offer, they will destroy us completely. Then we must do something they do not expect, Dr. Minsu said quietly. We must refuse. We must refuse their offer, and we must prepare for war. Silence fell over the room. The weight of what she had just said settled on everyone. War. True war. Not the conflicts between nations that humanity had known, but war against an enemy that could destroy entire cities from space. Dr. Minsu. We cannot win this fight, the diplomat said, his voice shaking. Not yet, Dr. Minsu replied, but we can survive it. And survival is the first step. Every day we remain unbroken, we gather strength. Every day they are forced to think about us, forced to deal with us. They begin to understand that we are not the simple problem they expected. We can win this war not by being stronger, but by being smarter and more determined than they have ever encountered. Commander Hei-Wan nodded slowly. The world must unite. All nations must work together. No more borders, no more divisions. Every person, every resource, everything must be dedicated to our survival. And that, Dr. Minsu said, looking at each of them in turn, is something the Valorian Empire cannot possibly understand. Their soldiers follow orders because they are told to. Our people will fight because they love something worth fighting for. There is a difference. There is a power in that difference. When the delegation returned to the meeting chamber, Teo was waiting. He seemed almost amused by their presence. You have made your decision? He asked. We have, Dr. Minsu said. Her voice was steady and clear. Humanity will not join the Valorian Empire. We will not accept subordination. We will not surrender our home, our freedom, or our future to anyone. The chamber went completely silent. For a moment, Teo simply stared at Dr. Minsu in disbelief. Then he stood, his full height revealing just how much larger he was than any human. When he spoke again, his voice was cold and final. Then you have chosen extinction. You have 7 days to prepare your species for destruction. Use the time as you wish. It will not matter. The Valorian Empire is unstoppable. What you have done today will be remembered only as the moment when one foolish species ended itself. As the human delegation was escorted from the chamber, Dr. Minsu allowed herself one moment of doubt. She had just committed all of humanity to a war against an impossible enemy. But then she thought of Earth below. She thought of every human who had ever dreamed of the stars. She thought of the children who would inherit whatever world she helped create in the next 7 days. The delegation descended to Earth in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. They had 7 days to unite a divided world, 7 days to turn farmers and teachers and students into warriors. 7 days to transform a planet that knew only peace between its own people into something the Valorian Empire had never faced before. 7 days to prove that humanity was not fragile at all. The message from Dr. Minsu reached every corner of Earth simultaneously. In every language, in every country, the same words echoed. Humanity would not surrender. The world would stand together, or it would fall apart. There was no middle ground anymore. The choice was simple and absolute. For the first time in human history, every nation put aside their conflicts. The military forces of the world united under a single command structure with Commander Haywan at its head. Weapons factories that had been producing goods for civilians were retooled overnight to manufacture military equipment. Scientists left their universities and laboratories to work on something greater than their individual dreams. They worked on humanity's survival. Dr. Minsu established a command center in Seoul that would coordinate everything. Around her, screens displayed data from every nation on Earth. The numbers were devastating. Humanity had approximately 12 million trained soldiers. The Valorian ship above them represented a military force that had conquered thousands of worlds. The gap was not just large, it seemed impossible to bridge, but Dr. Minsu did not focus on what humanity lacked. Instead, she focused on what they possessed. The Valorian ship was in orbit around Earth. It was in a fixed position. That meant it could not hide. It could be observed. It could be studied. It could be fought. Ji-woo was a young engineer from Korea, barely 30 years old with quick hands and quicker mind. She had spent years working on experimental satellite technology. Now, instead of launching satellites to study distant stars, she was tasked with something far more urgent. She had to find a way to breach Valorian technology and turn it against itself. "Look at these transmission patterns," Ji-woo said to her team, pointing at the data Dr. Minsu had provided from the diplomatic encounter. The Valorian ship communicates using quantum signals. Their technology is more advanced, yes, but it operates on principles we can understand. They communicate because they must. Every command has to be transmitted. Every system has to be coordinated. "So you are saying we can intercept their communications?" asked one of her engineers. "Not intercept," Ji-woo corrected. "But we can listen. We can learn. And if we understand their patterns, we might be able to disrupt them." Meanwhile, Commander Haywan worked on military strategy. He knew that traditional warfare would be useless. Valorian weapons were far too advanced. Human missiles would be destroyed before they reached the ship. Human aircraft would be shot down instantly. They could not win through strength. "We must think like humans," Haywan told his generals. "The Valorians are strong, but they are also rigid. They follow protocols. They expect their enemies to fight in certain ways. We must do something they do not expect. We must make them confused. We must make them uncertain. We must make them understand that this war cannot be won the way they have always won wars." Over the next 3 days, humanity prepared. In the skies above Earth, Military aircraft took up defensive positions. On the ground, soldiers dug in, preparing fortifications and defensive positions. In factories around the world, engineers worked around the clock to produce weapons and supplies. And in hidden locations, Ji-woo and her team worked on something even more ambitious, a computer virus designed to infiltrate Valorian systems. The work was nearly impossible. They were trying to create a weapon against technology that was centuries ahead of their own. But desperation can accomplish things that seem impossible. The fear of extinction can drive humans to achieve miracles. On the seventh day, the Valorian fleet moved into position around Earth. Additional ships appeared from hyperspace, surrounding the planet like predators circling prey. Teo sent a final message. Humanity's time was up. They had one last chance to surrender or face total annihilation. Dr. Min-soo sent her response. It was simple and clear. Humanity refuses. Come and take what you want if you can. The first attack came without warning. Valorian weapons fired from the ships, destroying military installations across the planet. Entire military bases were obliterated in seconds. Thousands of soldiers died in the first moments of the attack. Major cities were targeted, their defenses overwhelmed by the sheer power of the alien weapons. But something unexpected happened. Humanity did not break. Instead, it adapted. Soldiers who survived the initial attacks continued fighting. Cities that lost their primary defenses found secondary defenses and used them. The military became a system of cells rather than a unified command. If one part was destroyed, the rest continued. If one base fell, others would take its place. Commander Haewon coordinated the response from his underground command center, which itself had been built with redundancy in mind. Multiple backup systems existed at every location. Information was stored in thousands of places instead of a few central locations. The Valorian Empire was used to fighting centralized enemies. Humanity was learning to fight as a distributed organism, a living system that could not be killed by destroying a single point. Ji-woo and her team, working in an underground bunker in South Korea, finally achieved a breakthrough. They had successfully created a virus that could infiltrate Valorian communication systems. It was not a guaranteed weapon. There was no way to test it, no way to be certain it would work. But they had created something that could possibly disrupt the enemy's command structure. "We have one chance to use this," Ji-woo told Dr. Min-soo during a video call. Her face was exhausted, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "If we deploy it now, we might disable some of their systems for a few minutes. But we only get one chance. After that, they will know what we have done and will implement countermeasures." "Use it," Dr. Min-soo commanded, "and time it with our military strike." The virus was launched. It spread through the Valorian communication network like invisible fire. For exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, the Valorian fleet's coordination systems failed. Ships lost contact with each other. Command signals were scrambled. For the first time since the invasion began, the Empire's forces were confused and disorganized. In those precious minutes, humanity's military launched every weapon they possessed. Missiles filled the sky. Fighters attacked with desperate intensity. It was not a victory. The Valorians still had superior firepower and still destroyed many human units. But in those moments, humanity struck back. They proved they could hurt their enemy. When the communication systems came back online and the Valorian fleet regained its coordination, they found something that shocked them. Humanity was not surrendering. Humanity was still fighting. More than that, humanity had wounded them. The virus had damaged 3 ships before being purged from the systems. Soldiers and equipment were lost. Teo stared at the reports in disbelief. A primitive species that had possessed space travel for less than a century had managed to strike at his fleet effectively. It was unprecedented. It was impossible. Yet it had happened. For the first time since the invasion began, the Valorian Empire was uncertain. And that uncertainty, that moment of doubt, was exactly what Dr. Minsu had been counting on. The war raged across the skies and lands of Earth for months. Cities burned, oceans turned red with fire from falling debris, mountains of smoke rose from the impact zones where Valorian weapons struck the planet. The human death toll climbed into the millions. Entire regions were transformed into wastelands. Civilizations that had taken centuries to build were destroyed in hours. Commander Haiwan lost count of how many soldiers he had sent to their deaths. Every day brought new reports of cities destroyed, bases overrun, fighter squadrons eliminated. The losses were staggering. Humanity was being slowly ground down by an enemy that possessed overwhelming superiority in every measurable way. By any logical calculation, humanity should have surrendered weeks ago. They should have given up and accepted the terms of integration into the empire, but humans did not surrender. Even as the situation became more desperate, as food became scarce and fuel ran low, people continued to fight. Military personnel worked without sleep for days at a time. Civilians turned their homes into bunkers and continued to support the war effort. Teachers became soldiers, scientists became engineers of weapons, musicians became drivers of supply trucks. Every human did whatever was necessary to survive. Dr. Minsu had changed during the months of war. She had become harder, her face lined with exhaustion and the weight of decisions that cost thousands of lives. She had not slept properly in weeks. Her office was now a command center buried deep underground, surrounded by screens showing the state of the war across the planet. Most of what she saw was bad news. "We cannot sustain this for much longer," said one of her military advisors during a briefing. His name was Captain Dae Jung, a strategic genius who had studied warfare his entire life. "Our weapons are failing. Our soldiers are exhausted. Our resources are nearly depleted. At this rate, we have perhaps 3 more months before our capacity to fight effectively becomes zero." "Then we must change our strategy," Dr. Minsu said quietly. "We cannot win through conventional warfare. We have proven that we can hurt them, but we cannot defeat them through strength alone." "What other choice do we have?" asked the captain. Dr. Minsu stood and walked to a window that showed a view of Seoul above them. The city was burning. Smoke covered the sky. "We fight their own system against them. The Valorian strength is their discipline and their logic. They are controlled and ordered. They follow protocols. But they have never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for a single goal. They have never faced an enemy that treats survival itself as the greatest victory." She turned to face Dae Jung and her other advisors. "We begin transmitting messages through Valorian channels. We tell their people what is happening here. We show them images of our soldiers fighting and dying rather than surrender. We show them that we refuse to break. We make them understand that we are not the simple problem they expected. We plant doubt in their minds. We make them question whether their empire is truly as unstoppable as they believed." Jiwoo, working with her engineering team, took on this new mission. She found ways to broadcast human messages on Valorian frequencies. The messages showed soldiers choosing death over surrender. They showed civilians protecting their homes. They showed families staying together even as cities fell around them. They showed the face of true desperation, not the weakness the Valorians expected, but the strength that comes from refusal to break. The transmissions reached not just the military forces attacking Earth, but the civilian populations within the Valorian Empire. For the first time, ordinary Valorians saw something that challenged their entire understanding of reality. They saw a young species, a supposedly fragile species, doing something that defied their logic and their understanding. The transmissions spread through Valorian society, creating discussions and doubts that had never existed before. Meanwhile, Dr. Minsu was planning something that required the most dangerous kind of courage. She would board a disabled Valorian ship that had crashed near the coast of Africa. She would infiltrate it with a small team. and she would plant Jiwoo's most advanced virus into the ship's core systems. "You will likely not return," Daejung said when she told him the plan. "I know," Dr. Minsu replied. "But if we do this correctly, it will not matter. The virus will spread through the entire Valorian fleet. Their systems will be disrupted, and they will know that even their greatest warriors cannot be safe from human ingenuity." The mission was prepared in secret. Dr. Minsu selected her team carefully. 5 soldiers, Jiwoo herself, and 2 scientists who understood Valorian technology. They equipped themselves with weapons captured from the Valorians and studied every detail of the crashed ship's layout. The night of the mission, they moved through the ruins of cities to reach the beach where the ship lay half submerged in the water. As they approached, Dr. Minsu felt something she had not felt in months. She felt hope. Real, solid hope. The crashed ship was massive, even partially destroyed. Its metal hull was still warm from the atmosphere entry. The team moved silently through its corridors, avoiding active Valorian patrols. Inside the ship, Dr. Minsu found what she was looking for, the central command core, where the ship communicated with the fleet. As Jiwoo worked to connect her virus to the ship's systems, Dr. Minsu stood guard. She could hear Valorian soldiers in the distance. They were running out of time. Minutes felt like hours. The work was delicate and could not be rushed. "It is done," Jiwoo finally whispered. "The virus is uploading now. 30 seconds. 20 seconds passed. The sound of Valorian weapons fire echoed through the corridors. They were close. 25 seconds. 30 seconds. "Upload complete," Jiwoo said. "We have to move now." The team ran through the corridors as explosions erupted behind them. Valorian soldiers tried to block their path, but the human team was faster, more desperate, more willing to fight without regard for their own safety. They made it to the chamber they had entered through and dove out into the water below just as the soldiers' weapons destroyed the entry point. The water was cold and dark, but they swam. They swam toward the waiting boats that would carry them back to safety. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of the ship's systems failing as the virus took hold. The virus spread through the Valorian fleet faster than anyone expected. The Valorians had not encountered anything like it before. Their immune systems were not designed to fight this kind of intrusion. Within hours, 4 major Valorian ships lost main power. Within a day, 6 ships were effectively disabled. For the first time in the war, humanity gained an advantage. The Valorian fleet, which had seemed unstoppable, was now struggling with internal system failures. They had to withdraw from some positions to perform repairs. They had to reduce the intensity of their attacks. Tae-oh, receiving reports of the disaster, finally felt something he had never felt before: fear. The young primitive species from the world called Earth had struck at the heart of Valorian technology itself. They had created a weapon that Valorian engineers could barely understand, and they had proven willing to infiltrate enemy vessels to deploy it. The certainty that had defined the Valorian approach began to crumble. For 3,000 years, no enemy had ever been able to hurt the Empire in this way. But humanity had done it, and Tae-oh knew that if they could do this once, they could do it again. The advantage of overwhelming military superiority was no longer as certain as it had been just days before. The Valorian Empire faced something unprecedented: their invincible military force, which had conquered thousands of worlds without serious resistance, was now locked in a genuine war against a species that refused to submit. The reports coming from Earth showed a situation that should have been simple, but had become infinitely complex. In the halls of power within the Valorian Empire, debate raged for the first time in living memory. Some commanders demanded total annihilation of Earth, complete destruction of humanity regardless of the cost. They believed the only way to restore their pride was to eliminate this species that had proven the Empire's invincibility was not absolute. Others, however, began to question the entire approach. Among those questioning was Admiral Su Kyung, a military leader who had spent her life studying different species and warfare tactics. She had been reviewing the transmissions that Jiwoo's broadcasts had sent through Valorian communications. She had been watching the images of human soldiers and civilians choosing death over surrender, and she was beginning to understand something crucial. If we destroy Earth completely, we will have proven nothing, Su Kyung said to the Council of Command. We will have destroyed a species that we could not conquer. That is not victory. That is failure masked as destruction. And the galaxy will know it. What do you suggest? Asked the council leader, an ancient Valorian named Ra-Wan, who had held power for centuries. Study them, Su Kyung replied. Learn from them. The humans possess something we have lost in our pursuit of perfection. They possess the will to survive against impossible odds. They sacrifice themselves for others. They fight not because it is logical, but because they believe something is worth dying for. These are not weaknesses. These are strengths we have forgotten. The debate within the Empire continued for weeks. Humanity used that time to repair and rebuild. New weapons were developed. New strategies were created. The military forces of Earth, though devastated by months of war, gathered strength for what they knew would come next. Dr. Min-Su received a message that would change everything. It came through secret channels, a communication from within the Valorian Empire itself. It came from those who believed that war against humanity had become wrong. They offered something unprecedented, an alliance. It is a trap, said Dae-jung immediately when he learned of the message. It must be a trick to lower our defenses. Perhaps, Dr. Min-Su said thoughtfully, but perhaps not. The Valorians are not used to deception. They are used to absolute strength and absolute obedience. Deception would require a level of dishonesty that runs counter to their entire philosophy. If someone within their system is offering alliance, it means they truly believe it is necessary. The message proposed something radical. There were factions within the Valorian Empire that wanted to remove Teo and those who supported him. But they could not do it without appearing weak in front of their own people. If they had a genuine external threat that they needed to respond to, an external threat that came in the form of a strong and respected ally, then internal political change became possible. Dr. Min-Su made a decision that stunned her advisors. She sent a message back to the Valorian dissenters accepting their offer of alliance. She agreed that humanity would not attack Valorian civilian targets or infrastructure. She agreed that once the current conflict was resolved, humans would be willing to negotiate as equals. You have given them everything, one diplomat said in shock. We have lost our leverage. No, Dr. Min-Su said calmly. We have traded one kind of leverage for another. Military superiority means nothing if the enemy's own government can be convinced that the war is unwinnable. Humanity's greatest weapon has never been our physical strength. It has always been our ability to make others understand that we will never stop fighting. Now we have made that clear, not just to the military, but to the civilian government of the Valorian Empire. Over the following weeks, the political situation within the Valorian civilization shifted dramatically. Admiral Su Kyung and her supporters began pushing for negotiations. The civilian population, influenced by the broadcasts showing human determination, began questioning the war. Media outlets that had always supported the Empire began asking difficult questions. Commander Teo found his authority increasingly challenged. A turning point came when Teo was removed from command. A coup, supported by political figures who believed that the war against humanity had become a failure rather than a victory, overthrew the old guard that had launched the invasion. Teo himself died when his personal vessel suffered what officials called a systems malfunction, though everyone understood it had been an execution. With the political situation changing, Admiral Su Kyung reached out directly to Dr. Min-Su. The two leaders agreed to meet in person aboard a neutral station, neither on Earth nor on a Valorian ship. When they finally sat face to face, Suk-young stared at the human woman with undisguised fascination. Dr. Min-soo was smaller, weaker, and physically inferior in every way to a Valorian. Yet she had forced the most powerful civilization in the galaxy to negotiate with her as an equal. "Why did you not surrender?" Suk-young asked simply. "Logically, you should have. The mathematical probability of your success was infinitesimal. Your soldiers died by the millions, your cities burned, your resources were depleted. Every measure of logic suggested that surrender was inevitable. Why did you refuse?" Dr. Min-soo considered the question carefully. "Because surrendering would have meant accepting that our existence did not matter. It would have meant agreeing that we were inferior and that we deserved to be controlled by others. But humans know something that I think the Valorian Empire has forgotten. We know that survival without freedom is not survival at all. We know that some things are worth dying for, and we would rather die fighting for them than live as slaves." Suk-young was silent for a long moment. Then she said something that would reshape the history of the galaxy. "The Valorian Empire is prepared to recognize humanity as a full member of our civilization, not subordinate, not controlled, equal. The war on Earth ended not with a human victory or a Valorian victory, but with a new beginning. The ships that had burned cities now helped rebuild them. Scientists from both species began working together. Technology flowed from the Valorians to Earth, but knowledge and wisdom flowed from humans to the Valorians. But even as peace was being established, not everyone was happy with the new arrangement. There were those within the Valorian military who saw the agreement as betrayal. There were those who believed that accepting humans as equals was an admission of defeat. These dissenters began planning, waiting, plotting their return to the old ways. Dr. Min-soo knew that this peace was fragile. She knew that the hard part was not winning the war, it was building something that could last. And as she looked toward the future, she understood that humanity's fight was far from over. It had only changed form.